Good morning to everyone. My name is Panu Miettinen and I am a co-founder in Vacuum Wood Tech. So I'm working in the same company as Pasi. And as Pasi told, actually the first commercial project out of our construction technology is actually in the field of vertical farming. And this is something that people oftentimes ask us, like, how did you end up doing these kind of a new style farm buildings from your construction technology? And I always answer that in the beginning we had just the idea of the technology, and of course we started to think like what would be the best way to break into the markets. And roughly in 2017 we realized that this indoor farming market was growing very quickly, and at the same time there was no sustainable and durable solutions for these farms. So we kind of made a strategic choice that we will start from breaking to the markets via this kind of a niche market, which has maybe a little bit lower regulation and which is also less price competed and less competed otherwise. And we have been very happy with that because there has been a lot of customer demands and contacts for our solution. And yeah, a little bit about my history. I'm actually a master of economics, and I've been living in the city for my whole life. So up till 2017, I had never grown anything in my life. So it was kind of a big jump to change from macroeconomics and stock market analyzing to vertical farming. But actually, quite fast, I realized that it's very similar actually growing plants in a professional way into analyzing, let's say, the stock market. It's just an equation where you have inputs and outputs. And in both cases, you have a lot of variance that you need to take into account. So it was kind of just a new way of using the econometric analysis. But maybe a little bit about the vertical farming. So we all know that we are facing huge problems in the global food system. So it's not about will we run out of resources, but rather which resource will be completely dried out first. So one of the main problems is that the population is still growing by maybe 2 billion persons by 2050. And actually we don't have that much of arable land to put new farms on. So it will be extremely hard to keep feeding the global population unless we can produce more food per square meter. And at the same time, we are also very short on clean water, and also now, as I'm sure you all know, after the war, the fertilizers also. So these are like the main resources that we need in efficient farming, and most of them are now already becoming very scarce, and this will of course raise the price of food in the future. And this is actually quite a surprising point, but even though the population is growing globally, at the same time, we're actually running out of farm workers. And this is mostly because farm work is a very hard job. The wages are low. It is oftentimes extremely hot outside, and most of the young people are moving into the cities. So we also need to find new ways to produce food with less labor in the future. And this is maybe the biggest threat to the global food system is the climate change, because a lot of our main crops are can be very easily affected by hot weather. And as we now predict that the temperature will rise by a couple of Celsius degree in this century, it looks likely that a lot of the current very food producing areas will be it will be very hard to produce the similar amount of food there after the climate has become warmer. So that is going to be a huge problem that places like India might become even places where growing the current food crops will be impossible. And then on top of those like climate related megatrends, of course, also especially in the Western countries, the consumer demand for clean, sustainable and pesticide free food has been growing. It's been kind of a mega trend that if you want to sell food, you have to have some of these properties in your product. So these are kind of the main drivers behind the need for a new way of growing food. And to tell you a little bit more about the logic of vertical farming, I always use this metaphor that you should think a vertical farm as a Japanese car factory, but instead of cars, it's producing plants. So the main idea is to build a completely isolated warehouse type building where you minimize the interaction with the outdoor environment. So you want to kind of create this perfect garden for your plants. And the idea is to keep the same optimal conditions year round every day and every hour in your vertical farm. So basically, it's a nice summertime for your plants every hour of the day. And the second main point, besides the fact that we want to build a completely isolated system, is that we want to produce as much food per square meter as possible. And as you can see from this picture, this is probably something like 14 layers or 10 layers, but the idea is to stack multiple layers of plant on top of each other to kind of really maximize the floor area. And of course, while we start producing a great amount of food in a small footprint, we can actually start to bring these farms closer to the consumers, because now the cost of the land is not such a big issue anymore, because we can produce in such an efficient way. This means that we can reduce the logistics, and we can bring these vertical farms into cities where there is also more workforce available. And also, because this is a closed system, all the resources are circulated within, so it's really resource efficient. And also, because you have really stable environment inside the farm, you can produce a very stable quality. So this is something that people really look in the grocery stores, that they don't buy the vegetables that don't look that good, but here we can produce a very uniform quality, so there is less food wastage. And to sum it up, at the moment, the current business model of vertical farming is to sell high-end premium products to urban consumers. And maybe a little bit more about the upsides. So as I told you, the resource efficiency is based on the fact that it's a closed loop. So all the water is circulating, and compared to the traditional farming methods, vertical farms actually save 95 to 99% of water. And also, when we take into account the efficiency of the production, we can produce the same amount of food in a vertical farm on a very small footprint compared to growing food outside. And now this is something, the no pesticides. In Finland, people are maybe not that interested in this topic, because already all of our food is grown with very little pesticides. But in a lot of countries where there's a lot of insects, farmers have to use a very high amount of pesticides, which will of course cause a lot of health hazards for the consumers. And for example, in the USA, the no pesticides claim can be the #1 marketing points for the companies. Now, of course, because this is a system that can work anywhere in the world, it improves the food security, because we can grow food anywhere. As long as you have electricity, you can grow food on a vertical farm. So we can kind of decentralize the food production, and we are not need to rely so heavily on just few areas producing all the food in the world. And as the last maybe main point of this slide, actually this vertical farming system is very good with data analysis. So everything is logged inside the vertical farm, all the pieces of data. We measure all the temperature, the humidity, the CO2 levels. And then we can also control those variables quite easily compared to growing food outdoors. So we can learn very fast what is the most efficient way of growing, and then we can continuously keep improving the resource efficiency. And I think this will be what really drives the growth of this business, because there's still so much gains to be had from this data analysis. Then the downsides, of course, this is a very high-tech solution compared to traditional farming methods. So the initial investment cost is extremely high, and this is why at the moment there are not so many farms in third world countries. It's mostly in the urban wealthy cities, because the capital is not just there in the poorer countries. And of course, because we are not using sunlight, the downside of this solution is that we need to utilize some electricity for the LED lights that give the growth to the plants. So that is something that all the companies are trying to optimize, how to use as little electricity as possible, but it's still more of a cost compared to farming outdoors. And this has actually been now in the latest years the biggest point, that this solution, it involves so many different technologies and so many different layers of solutions that it's actually quite hard to make these projects happen as intended. There is still not much experience of building these large vertical farms, and there are so many different companies operating in the business that it's really hard, the project management side of it. But to conclude it, the the technologies are there for vertical farming, and the global need is there for the vertical farming. But now the question is that can the business scale up, drive down the investment cost, drive down the electricity cost, and can we really make it a truly profitable business model? How do you guys feel? Like we're quite short on time. Do you like want me to stop here or maybe go for like 5 minutes?
I think you can go on. People would just drop out if they have to, but since we have the recording, I think they have the chance then to see also like the rest of what you have to say. Definitely go on.
Oh, okay, thanks. And then maybe a couple words about the current state of the business. So at the moment, pretty much every vertical farm in the world is growing just leafy greens, so lettuces, basil, other herbs, and so on. And this is because they are the easiest one and the most profitable ones to grow, because the small greens, they grow very fast. So you can produce a great amount of such plants in a short time period. And also, if you think about a lettuce, you eat almost the whole plant. So when you invest electricity in growing this biomass, when you eat the whole lettuce, it's of course good for the business model. And if you think about, let's say, a cucumber, you first need to grow the stem and the other parts of the cucumber plant that you don't end up eating. So in the case of lettuce, we eat roughly 90% of the produce, and in the case of cucumber, we only eat 50%. So in that sense, the vertical farming companies are now like focusing on these most profitable plants. And of course, the greens also have very little calorie content, and this means that they grow with less light compared to something like tomatoes or beans. And of course, the leafy greens are also very small. So when you think about the idea of stacking layers on top of each other, when you have a really small plant, you can put a lot of layers in a small space. So this is a little bit the problem, because all the vertical farming companies are talking about how they will solve the food security problems. And if we are only producing really low calorie niche products, then maybe that's not the most efficient way to solve the food problems. But I'm sure that in the future, the variety of plants grown in vertical farm will become more diverse. And there is a lot of research and development going on in this sector. And then a little bit about the companies. So this is still a very new solution, the vertical farming, in the sense of agriculture. It has been around for roughly 15 years, and the boom has been ongoing for maybe 7 years. So it's still like a very open market. There's a lot of these kind of very small or medium-sized companies, and nobody has yet taken like the Google status of this business. So if you're a customer who wants to buy a vertical farm and you start to Google it out, you will see that there is a large amount of small providers. And the top marketing points for pretty much all the vertical farming companies are the sustainability, the taste and the quality of the produce, and then the fact that you don't need to use pesticides. And actually, the venture capitalists have been, in the last 5 years, they have been investing quite a lot in the vertical farming sector, because of course the mega trends are there, and it looks like this might be the kind of a good bet for the long-term investors. And actually last year there was supposed to be the first stock market listings from vertical farming companies, but actually they were cancelled because of the war and the turbulence in the economic system. But already we have a couple of companies from USA and from Germany that actually are valued close to 1 billion. The business model is that the vertical farming companies are cooperating very closely with the local large food retailers. So let's say you own a premium food store, so then you do a deal with a vertical farming company. They will build a vertical farm close to your customers, and then you can market your produce as being like hyper local, and you can get a higher price. So this is the business logic. And then this is quite interesting. As I stated, the market is still very new, and 50% of the companies who are now growing food in vertical farms, they had zero experience in agriculture. And I think this is, of course, at the same time a risk, because there is not much experience, but it's great that this new technology has brought a lot of new expertise to the like agricultural industry. There are a lot of people who are coming from like the technology side. So they might have been developing LED lights, they might be data analysts, or they might be doing some climate controls or other systems. So it's a lot of tech people that have come to the agricultural business. And of course, this also causes problems because they have no experience with interacting with the plants. So they might think a little bit too much with the engineering brain side. And still 2/3 of the vertical farming companies own just one farm. So it's still kind of a very scattered market. And only 5% of the vertical farming companies made over 10 million revenue per year. So it's still a very like a small family business in this time. But still yearly now, there's been investments for roughly 1 billion per year in such technologies, and also the very big investors have been involved. So the Japanese SoftBank and of course Amazon, which owns the premium food store called Whole Foods, they have been also investing in this kind of vertical farming companies. And yeah, currently the vertical farming market is estimated to be at roughly 4 billion euros per year, and it has been growing very fast since 2015, as you can see it from the graph. And actually, before the war, all the projections were saying that the vertical farming market will double like every 3 to 4 years. So the growth rate is really fast. But of course, now we need to see if the rise in interest rates and the financial problems will kind of slow that down. But the long-term projection is that vertical farming will grow very fast, and it will become a big industry in the coming decades. And then in the future, what I'm looking for, of course, I'm looking for more diverse crop types, because it's a little bit maybe boring that if you only grow like lettuces in your vertical farms, then it will just stay as a niche market and you cannot really grow to be a global solution. So I want to see more of berries and tomatoes. For example, in Finland, it will be great to get some local strawberries year round and not have to buy those Spanish very watery strawberries. And also a lot of R&D is put into this kind of a specialty plants and superfoods. So for example, in this kind of vertical farm where you can control the environment, you can actually control also how much vitamins and other good ingredients are in your plants. So you can actually produce these kind of superfoods which have more of these wanted ingredients. And of course, the big question is, can we start also producing protein in the vertical farms, because that would make the whole system very much more interesting. And there has been some research, for example, to produce beans, which have a high protein content. So I think this will be coming in the next 5 years in the market. And the calorie production is quite difficult because all the light is coming from LED lights. So we need to use electricity for that. So if we were to produce, let's say, wheat in a vertical farm, the electricity bill would be absurd at the moment. So with the current price levels, it is not feasible, but in 30, 40 years, if we really have food shortage and the prices shift, it might actually become viable to produce a large amount of calories also in vertical farms. But mostly I'm looking to the fact that we can integrate some of our food production into urban areas, because nowadays citizens don't have that much of a touch with growing plants. But for example, our company is offering solutions that we can build a vertical farm on the yard of your apartment complex or on the rooftop of your apartment complex. And this would give a chance to every urban citizen to grow some of their own food and have this kind of a very meaningful hobby. And of course, one of the upsides in Finland is that even during the winter, you would have at least one space in your apartment complex that has a summer every day of the year, and you can really see the green plants. And maybe as a final point, one of the topics debated on this industry is it better to build these kind of huge 10,000 square meter farms, or maybe go for more of these local small farms that produce for a certain building or a certain apartment block. And I believe that there is demand for both. So we should produce the leafy greens on the large scale in large farms, maybe like 20 kilometers from the urban areas. But then I believe we can also integrate some of these smaller farms into the urban environment, and then kind of make these hyper local vegetables. Yeah, thank you for listening, and here are my contact details.